Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi, Gaur Bhaktavinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada. It's time for Krishna book. These pastimes are so nice. This is volume 2, chapter 20. Why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice. It is so great. Okay. King Yudhisthira was known as Ajata Shatru, or a person who has no enemy. Therefore, when all men, all demigods, all kings, sages, and saints saw the successful termination of the Rajasuya yajna performed by King Yudhisthira, they became very happy. Duryodhana alone was not happy, was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Sukadeva Goswami to explain this. Sukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, your father, King Yudhisthira, was a great soul. Your grandfather, King Yudhisthira, was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone as his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajatashatru, one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of the Kuru dynasty in taking charge of different departments for the management of the Rajasuya sacrifice. For example, Bhimasen was put in charge of the kitchen department. Duryodhana was in charge of the treasury department. Sahadev in charge of the reception department. Nakula in charge of the store department. And Arjuna was engaged in looking after the comforts of the elderly persons. The most astonishing feature was that Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. The queen, the goddess of fortune Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food, and because Kṛṣṇa was famous for giving charity, he was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Bharishrava, and Santardana, the son of Balika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rajasuya sacrifice. They were all so bound in loving affection for King Yudhisthira that they simply wanted to please him. After Shishupal had died by the mercy of Lord Krishna and had become merged in the spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rajasuya yajna, when all friends, guests, and well-wishers had been sufficiently honored and rewarded, King Yudhisthira went to bathe in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapur is today standing on the bank of the Yamuna, and the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that King Yudhisthira went to bathe in the Ganges indicates, therefore, that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Yamuna was also known as the Ganges. And while the king was taking the Avabrita bath, different musical instruments such as mridangas, conch shells, drums, kettle drums, and bugles vibrated. In addition, the ankle bells of the dancing girls jingled. Many groups of professional singers played veenas, flutes, gongs, and cymbals, and thus a tumultuous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms like Srinjaya, Cambodia, Kuru, Kekaya, and Koshala were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses, and soldiers. All were passing in a procession, and King Yudhisthira was in the forefront. The executive members, such as the priests, religious ministers, and Brahmins, were performing a sacrifice, and all were loudly chanting the Vedic hymns. The demigods, the inhabitants of the Pitriloka and Gandharva-loka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur, Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scent and floral oils, were nicely dressed in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments. They were all enjoying the ceremony, and they threw on each other liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they were enjoying the occasion. Professional prostitutes were also engaged by jubilantly smearing these liquid substances on the bodies of the men, and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow. In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigods had come in different airplanes, and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of the royal family arrived, gorgeously decorated and surrounded by bodyguards on the surface of different palanquins. During this time, Lord Krishna, the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, and his special friend Arjuna were both throwing the liquid substances on the bodies of the queens. The queens became bashful, but at the same time their beautiful smiling brightened their faces. Because of the liquid substances thrown on their bodies, the saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breasts and their waists, became partially visible because of the wet cloth. The queens also brought in buckets of liquid substances and sprinkled them on the bodies of their brothers-in-law. As they engaged in such jubilant activities, their hair fell loose, and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the queens were thus engaged in these jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in heart became agitated by lustful desires. In other words, such behavior between pure males and females is enjoyable, but persons who are materially contaminated become lustful. King Yudhisthira, in a gorgeous chariot yoked by excellent horses, was present with his queens, including Draupadi and others. The festivities of the sacrifice were so beautiful that it appeared as if Rajasuya was standing there in person with the functions of the sacrifice. Following the Rajasuya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic duty known as Pratni Samyaja. This sacrifice was performed along with one's wife, and it was also duly performed by the priests of King Yudhisthira. When Queen Draupadi and King Yudhisthira were taking their Avabrita bath, the citizens of Hastinapur, as well as the demigods, began to beat on drums and blow trumpets out of feelings of happiness, and there was a shower of flowers from the sky. When the king and the queen finished their bath in the Ganges, all other citizens, consisting of all the varnas or castes, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Sudras, took their baths in the Ganges. Bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literatures because by such bathing one becomes freed from all sinful reactions. This is still current in India, especially at particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges. After taking his bath, King Yudhisthira dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper and decorated himself with valuable jewelry. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but he also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and to the others who had participated in the yagnas. In this way, they were all worshipped by King Yudhisthira. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a great devotee of Lord Narayan, or because he was a Vaishnav, he therefore knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers endeavor to see everyone as God is an artificial way towards oneness, but a Vaishnav, or a devotee of Lord Narayan, sees every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a Vaishnav's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform. Since one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part, because they all belong to the same body, so a Vaishnav does not see a human being as distinct from an animal, because in both of them he sees the soul and the supersoul seated simultaneously. When everyone was refreshed after bathing, and was dressed in silken clothing with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, they looked altogether like the demigods from heaven. This was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed. Each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling. Spots of tilak and curling hair were scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive. Persons who had participated in the Rajasuya sacrifice, including the most cultured priests, the Brahmins who had assisted in the performance of the sacrifice, the citizens of all varnas, kings, demigods, sages, saints, and citizens of Pitriloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhisthira, and at the end they happily departed for their residences. When returning to their homes, they talked of the dealings of King Yudhisthira, and even after continuous talk of his greatness, they were not satiated, just as one may drink nectar over and over again and never be satisfied. After the departure of all others, Maharaj Yudhisthira restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna, by not allowing them to leave. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of the king. He therefore sent back all the heroes of the Yadu dynasty like Samba and others. All of them returned to Dwarka, and Lord Krishna personally remained in order to give pleasure to the king. In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled, but one is never able to fulfill his desires to his full satisfaction. King Yudhisthira, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rajasuya Yagna. From the description of the execution of the Rajasuya Yagna, it appears that such a function is a great ocean of opulent desires. It's not possible for an ordinary man to cross over such an ocean. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, King Yudhisthira was able to cross over it very easily, and thus he became freed from all anxieties. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhisthira had become very famous after performance of the Rajasuya Yagna, and was fully satisfied in every respect, he began to burn with the fire of envy, because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace which had been constructed by the demon Maya for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship, and was befitting the position of great princes, kings, or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas were living with their family members, and Queen Draupadi was serving her husbands very peacefully. Because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens, with their heavy breasts and thin waists, moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdoms. Because a portion of their breasts was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared to be reddish. With their full earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very beautiful. After looking at such beauties in the palace of King Yudhisthira, Duryodhana became envious. He became especially envious and lusty upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi, because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and with other princes he had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but had failed to achieve her. Once upon a time, King Yudhisthira was sitting on the golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as their great well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, were present, and the material opulence of King Yudhisthira seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When he was sitting on the throne, surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering prayers to him in the form of nice songs, Duryodhana, with his younger brother, came to the palace. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet, and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore on a slight provocation he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. He was irritated because he failed to distinguish between water and land. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhana was also illusioned by this craftsmanship, and when he was crossing water, thinking it to be land, he fell down. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhisthira could understand the feelings of Duryodhana, and he tried to restrain the queens from laughing, but Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhisthira should not restrain them from enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhana might be fooled in that way, and that all of them might enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt very insulted. His hair stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace, bowing his head. He was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhishthira also became very sorry. But despite all occurrences, Krishna was silent. He did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the two sects of the Kuru dynasty. It appeared that it was a part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Shukadeva Goswami as to why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Shukadeva Goswami. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the second volume, 20th chapter of Krishna, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice.